3, 2, 1. Mic check. Three, two, one. Mic check. Hi, Sam. Can we just do a quick audio check, please?
Hello, yeah.
Yeah, coming through nice and clearly, thanks.
Lovely.
Hi, Rosie. Can we just quickly do a microphone check, please?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yep, you're coming through nice and clear, thanks.
Good.
To log in and
Hi, Maggie. Can we just do a quick audio check, please?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me now?
Thanks. You're coming through nice and clearly.
Okay, thank you.
Well, good evening, councillors. We don't have any members of the public with us this evening, which is a shame, but perhaps in future meetings we'll have more attendees. Bit of a rough night tonight, so I guess they're staying at home. So welcome to this meeting on the 7th of December 2021. I'm Councillor Julie Young. I'm Councillor for Greenstone Ward, and I will be chairing the meeting this evening. This meeting is being held in the Grand Jury Room in the Town Hall in Colchester. It is also being broadcast live over the internet, where it can be watched via the Council's YouTube channel, where the recording will be available to view afterwards. For those attending here in the grand jury room, I can assure you that a risk assessment, including COVID-19 risks, has been undertaken for this meeting. Can I remind everyone that seating is socially distanced? Please do not move the chairs. Masks can be removed when seated. All desks and microphones have been sanitised before the meeting, and I ask that any members of the public or visiting councillors sanitise the Have Your Say microphone before speaking, using the antiseptic wipes provided. Action in the event of emergency. There are no planned alarms planned for this evening, so if an alarm sounds, please evacuate the town hall by going down the main staircase or the back staircase to the High Street and then to the car park behind the town hall in St Runwood Street. Councillors and officers taking part in the meeting are requested to mute their microphones. Please activate the microphone when invited to speak and turn the microphone off again when you have finished speaking. With the exception of the Democratic Services officers advising us, would participants in the grand jury room please mute their microphones unless they are invited to speak. The provisions in the Constitution around the timing of breaks will apply to this meeting. I will now ask members of the committee and attending officers to introduce themselves, starting with Lindsey Barker.
Good evening. I'm Lindsey Barker, Strategic Director of Policy and Place, assisting at the meeting this evening.
Good evening, Chair. David King, Councillor for Mile End.
Yeah, Ben Plummer, Climate Emergency Officer at the Council.
So a very wet Councillor Scaldis, Old Heath, Hive and Rowhedge.
Good evening. My name is Councillor Mark Corey, representing Wivenhoe, and it's lovely to have a Christmas tree in the background. Julie, behind you, it looks fantastic.
Good evening. Councillor Peter Chillingworth, representing the Rural North.
Matthew Evans, Democratic Services Officer.
I switched the Christmas tree on especially, so to be a bit festive. It looks like the White House, doesn't it? Or exactly, yeah. Broadcasting to the nation on Christmas Day. Anyway, back to the agenda. So we've got item number 2, which is substitutions. Matthew, do we have any substitutions? We do not have any substitutions, and we've had a late indication of Councillor Barber, who isn't able to be with us this evening, but we haven't heard from Councillor Jowers, so maybe he will attend or turn up in a moment. If we move on to item number 3, I've got no urgent items. Item number 4, declaration of interest. Any member wishing to declare? I see no indications. And so we move on, councillors, to item number 5, which is minutes of the previous meeting. If we can have a look through those. I just wanted to sort of do a bit of a resume myself. Glyphosates and the use of glyphosates continue to interest the residents of Colchester. So we had a few comments and questions about that. We had some questions about the viability of our tree planting programme, and I hope that's been answered sufficiently. I noticed Councillor Martin Warnes attended at the last meeting and discussed secure cycle parking. There was a planning application pending at the time, and I'm not actually up to date with how that turned out. Perhaps somebody in the room is aware whether that went through, but he made a specific inquiry about Sheergate steps and some provision around there for cyclists coming in from his area of Beerchurch. So maybe we can pick that up on another agenda, Ben. I think there was a request from Councillor Corey to have a specific item on secure cycle parking. So perhaps we'll pick that up in the work programme. And then I think Councillor Chowers, in terms of street trees, mentioned he thought we should be focusing on planting street trees. So maybe we can pick that up in the future when we do an update. And our liaison with the Ministry of Defence in terms of their woodland. So again, perhaps we can return to that at future meetings. Members, do the minutes look like an accurate record of the meeting that we held? Yep, I see some indications. Thank you for that. I will sign those off. And we'll move on to item number 6, which is have your say. We haven't got anybody present this evening to have their say, but we have had a submission from Councillor G. Oxford, which Matthew Evans will read to us.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Oxford says, following on from COP26 and deforestation and even reversing it, I would like the deforestation of the past 200 years reversed on the Highwoods Country Park. There were native woods thriving there for many centuries. We could easily start with 3,000 trees planted on the bottom meadow behind the old lay field. This would help reduce pollution and increase tree canopy percentages. And that's all, Chair.
Thank you very much. Lindsay, can you take that inquiry, please, and perhaps come back to the committee with some information about that in the next meeting?
Yes, Chair, very happy to do that.
Thank you very much. So we'll move on to our main substantive item, which is item number 7, which is the social value portal and green procurement, to hear about progress with that agenda. And I believe we've got Sam Preston introducing the item, and she's joining us on Zoom. Good evening, Sam.
Good evening, Chair. Thank you.
Over to you, I think.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. So you'll have seen the report that I sent through, which is essentially looking at what progress we've made so far with social value within procurement. I've made the point within the report that actually the use of the social value portal, although useful, hasn't particularly meant that we've achieved much at this point. So what I've tried to do within the report is tell you what we are planning to do. This area is relatively new to me, so we are starting from the beginning, but actually, as you'll see in the report, I do feel that there's a lot of opportunity for improvement within the processes that the council uses. I did try and break down into different categories of how we intend to move this forward, but I'll just give you a little bit of an overview of where we are now. So currently it's very much in review stage, and by review I mean unpicking absolutely everything that we're currently doing around procurement. We'll be looking through the strategy, through the contracts procedure rules, through the constitution to see where we can do anything within those documents. We're looking at everything right from authorised signatories through to how we would assess a tender. We're going to review all of the suppliers that we currently use. Where are they? What are they doing at the moment around social value? What are their plans around sustainability and carbon reduction? Reviewing all of the systems and processes that we currently use, how we communicate with our suppliers, how we communicate with people within the council, looking at the website and the information that we have on there, and also the portals that we use to track progression on procurement and then contract management. We have made a start with that, but I'm sure you can appreciate there's a lot of work to do there. However, I do think we've already got quite a good idea on where we need to go with it all. One of the key things that I want to focus on is how we engage with businesses, and possibly looking at doing a consultation with local businesses to see what would prevent them at the moment from being a supplier to the council, and also then looking at how we can support them to meet the criteria that we're going to want going forward around social value and sustainability. There's going to be a huge emphasis on how we implement it across the council. So at the moment we've got the social value portal, but just because we can collect the information doesn't mean that we've encouraged and supported our officers to look for social value when they are going out to procurement. So we're going to look at full training programs, making sure that we improve communications to the people that have the budget responsibility and who spend the money. We are also going to look at creating better tools that we can use that will improve efficiency within the procurement processes, but also help us to track and monitor what we're doing much more clearly. And I do think that that will have a significant impact on how we can then measure the impact of the social value that we are achieving. We as part of the process and as part of my learning taking this area on, I am attending lots of different groups and partnership meetings. And I'm sure you can appreciate actually social value across the board, and all of the public sector organisations are looking to do a lot of work in this area. So what I want to do is to be able to learn from what they're doing, to use what they're doing and be part of that, but also not to let some of the bigger, more strategic projects hold us back from making some quick changes on the ground now. So we're starting to gather ideas about what we will propose. I don't want to go into it too much at this stage, because obviously we've got a lot of work to do, and then hopefully I'll be able to bring back the full proposals later on. But just some examples of what I've heard elsewhere, making sure that if we go out to OJU level tender, that we have at least one local supplier shortlisted. Anything under the OJU levels, making sure that everyone shortlisted is local. But then even within that, we have to define what we believe is local to us, and how far we're going to let that go out. We're also going to make it really clear that our suppliers must commit to local employment. I'm looking to start engaging with my colleague Jason Granger, who does work around local employability and supporting people that are accessing welfare benefits to get back into employment. So hopefully do some really good work there around making our suppliers engage with that team and with the DWP. Also looking at working with Essex University, and even down to the level of working with Career Track, who manage our apprenticeships at the moment. So asking people to consider all of that. Also looking at how they will reduce their environmental impact. So whether it's carbon reduction, whether it's reduced waste, whether it's buying different things. And we will build all of that into a really clear process for people to follow, so that it's not really an option of whether we look at these things, it's just part of what we do. I think that the key thing for me really is around that stronger direction to be given to the budget managers, and also then having adequate governance in place. So making sure that we're checking that if people are committing to social value and environmental sustainability, that we're checking that they're actually doing that and including that within the contracts that we give to people. I think I've probably covered most of it there, but if anyone's got any questions, I'm very happy to take them.
Thanks very much, Sam. I've got Councillor Chillingworth.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Sam, for a clear presentation. I wanted to ask a question on joint procurement. Am I right in thinking we are in a group within other councils procuring material on fairly large contracts? And if so, how is that fitting in? Do they also use this social value portal? Thank you.
Sam, could you like to answer that, please?
Yeah. So with the social value portal, I believe that lots of Essex authorities use that. There are several partnership groups where people are looking to work more closely together along the lines of joint procurement. It's certainly something that I'm taking on as a priority. I've had conversations with Essex County Council and colleagues elsewhere to look at how we can really get that moving forward. I think there's probably some examples of joint procurement, but not very much, if I'm honest. And actually part of what we're trying to do is understand where we have things that, you know, are very common between the organisations, where there'll clearly be benefit financially and potentially environmentally by doing that. So it is something that we're looking at. I mean, one example is we've just employed a procurement trainee. So we're going to be taking them through full accreditation to become a full procurement officer, and we're going to do that with Essex County Council, hopefully, because they have a much bigger team. They've got really clear training and progression routes, so we're going to try and benefit from some of that. But we're hoping that by doing that also, our officer will have that really good connection with people within Essex, so they'll understand where we can start doing some more joint procurement with them.
Thanks very much. David.
Thank you also, Sam. We know you well, and know you'll get a grip of this if anybody can. As a former buyer, we all go back in our own history. I just know how difficult it is to change a buying culture. And actually, for that matter, a supply culture. So I don't underestimate that this will take some perseverance and some energy to go and get the changes you described done. But for me, the important thing will be, without too much cost and complexity, the kinds of checks you propose making on that cultural change. And the best evidence is that people actually are buying, taking into account social value. And my concern would be that unless we see early progress, we won't see any that counts. So my challenge to you, or question to you, if I may, is about the timetable. And when you think you might have something that might count as a substantive indicator of progress made. Now, I say this because your timetable, to the extent you have one, I think is 18 months. I remember talking about this a year ago, and some colleagues were talking about it before then. We agreed, as I say, a year or so ago on the principle of this, and we had some intense conversations. We agreed on this, and we left it to officers to take forward. Everybody in this room understands the many pressures there are, and as I say, as a former buyer, I absolutely get it. And as you put into your own report, value, quite rightly, is a really critical part of the procurement process, especially when spending more on stuff, whatever it might be, has a consequence elsewhere. You know, either a bigger hole in the budget, or we can't do something else. So this was always about balance. We had that conversation a long time ago. None of us want to get into the depth of that detail, but we will need to see some evidence over the months ahead that we are genuinely getting this to happen. And if not, there will be a really reasonable question to ask, which is why not? You know, as I say, 2 or 3 years since we've first indicated on this before we get delivery. So could you talk to timing, Sam? Could you talk to the kind of cross-check challenge you've got and the culture? Do you need our help in any way? Thanks.
Sam, over to you.
Thank you. Yep, I fully appreciate why you've asked that question and why you would want a timeline. It's very difficult at this stage, without avoiding the question, to give you a full timeline because there are so many facets to what I want to do in this area. But what I can say is, and I think I mentioned earlier, there's the higher level strategic stuff that I need to do, and I need to unpick all of that and then put forward proposals. We're getting on with that now. We need to understand who our suppliers are currently, but I don't want to do all of that work without making progress. So some examples of what we're doing at the moment, we've asked our colleague Ben Plummer, who's in the meeting, to look at some of our existing contracts because we want to see where they fall down around social value and sustainability and get input into that now so that we can know what we need to be looking for in the future. So we're going to just do a couple initially to see how that works and then hopefully roll that out further. Something else that we are doing is looking at some of the big spend contracts, and I guess also some that would be really key for social value. We're starting to unpick around the work that we do with trees and where we use consultants and various other things. So we've got some key contracts or key areas of purchasing, let's say, that we're already kind of digging into and starting to do that work. So we will have a timeline with the strategic stuff, but in terms of getting social value out of our current spend, we're already going to start doing that and we will be monitoring that. So I do anticipate that very quickly we'll have some real results and some actual figures or whatever that we can bring to you and show that it is going to start to work. I don't know if that answers it fully for you, but we're definitely committed to this now. It is something that, you know, I said we've taken on this new trainee officer and we made it very clear to them that this will be their first priority to start making these changes. But it's the whole package. So it's from how we use the systems that we've currently got, whether we need new systems, how we communicate with people, how we communicate internally. There are so many different timelines that will be there. I am going to put it into a full program of work. So once that's fully done and approved, I can certainly bring that back as well to give you the clearer timelines.
Chair, for me.
Yes, David, do come back.
Thank you. Sam, thank you very much for that. That is no less a reassurance than I expected. I think I ought to round this out by just sort of saying we all here will, I'm sure, recognise the absolute importance of what we're doing here, particularly the sustainability piece, which despite the context of conversations around global and climate emergency, we didn't talk so much about when we had those conversations around social value. So I know that the job's grown. The bit I want to say, Madam Chair, is the important messaging to your suppliers, because we need, and we are, as a buying organisation, we have influence. We need to see them understand that our asking them to do different and better really matters. Whether they win or whether they don't, any particular tender, it's signalling that the public sector, as a very major buyer, is really committed at every level, in every local authority, not just centrally, to ensuring that we see a sustained change. But thank you very much, Sam.
I think, Sam, what Councillor King is asking for is to see if we can sort of do some kind of press release or press story about our intent that we are starting to look very carefully at the contracts we have and what we're going to be actually looking for in the future, so that people out there can start to get prepared for that and change their practices. I've got Councillor Corey coming in.
Thank you, Chair. I did miss a tiny bit of the presentation and first question, so I hope not to repeat. But thank you, Sam. This is a really important paper and a further step along the line on both social and environmental progress. So thank you for it. And I see the intent there and want to absolutely support it through the organisation. Two things. One, I actually feel, as important as it is and as much further that we need to go, we have got some recent examples, the Mercury Theatre and recent procurement outside the Mercury Theatre after the rebuild, all trying to be done locally by local contractors and tradespersons, and things where over time we have ensured a social benefit, and we've talked about it when constructing our own houses or designing them using CBH, which I feel is an important local partner that we procure, and we procure all types of services with them and successfully. But also when we, as far back as bringing our IT back in-house. So that was something that I was in the resources portfolio at that time, and was really proud of seeing a team internally started up instead of having Capita, which are a massive organisation with little social value and little care for environmental impact. They may have changed their ways. I do not want to say anything libelous. However, it's been much better having it locally run, and we are able to then work with partners more effectively. We have greater control, and therefore greater control and benefit from a social value point of view and environmental point of view. Secondly, what I do want to say is that I see it's at £100,000 value. I fully understand why that has been set. However, I do wonder if we can say that the work has to be done at £100,000 value contracts. However, can the process still be followed for contracts of lesser value? Because we know that if you're going to go and procure I don't know, the cleaning products for the town hall through our contracts, or more paper cups. We want to make sure that we're doing that in the most ethical way, even if it's a small part of what we do. Everyone needs to be thinking about it, whether it's a £5,000 or a £20,000 contract. It's not as big as 100,000, but we need to ensure that that culture is throughout everything we do, even when it comes to buying our stationery and buying the stuff that we use in the office day to day or at home. Is it something that is reused, made of reusable plastic? Is it something that will just be chucked away in landfill? We have to, every small minor detail we should be looking into in terms of environmental impact. It's either made industry in a factory, and it's often that we've exported our emissions and it's made in China and it doesn't really impact us as much. Bring it home locally, make it out of sustainable products, buy it from one of the independent traders in town. If we can do that with smaller contracts as well, I hope you understand from my experience working with you, Sam, I don't want to give you extra work, and I do understand the strategic value and the £100,000 price tag, but I hope you get what I mean about the culture down to a £10 purchase locally. Thank you.
Sam, is that something that can be considered?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is being considered. I think that's kind of the split between, and that's why the timeline's so difficult to get across at the moment, because we've got that high level stuff, but in the background we're also looking at things like aggregated spend. So where you're saying about stationery, things like that, actually how much are we spending as a council on stationery? Should we be then procuring that under a contract? But even the really low level spend, what I'm trying to do and what the teams are really engaged with is shifting what is our purchasing team from being administrative and process based to actually helping them support the organisation and support people to access those types of suppliers, no matter what it is that they're looking for. So again, that's going to be quite a fundamental change in what they're doing. And in order to do that, I have to make the processes really efficient to give them the time then to be the expert in who is the best supplier for the paper cups, whatever it is that we're looking for. So we're not just looking high level, we are looking at absolutely everything here, to achieve what it is that you're looking for, really.
Mark, do you want to come back?
Thank you, Julie. I just forgot to say something that is not really to do with this, but in terms of processes, my experience of working with Sam and her team when it came down to the COVID support money, she was able to work at a strategic level with higher values down to a minutiae of detail. So I just want to say thank you for her work on that. And I have absolute full confidence she'll get this right, and her teams based on that experience previously. So good luck, Sam. I know you can do it. Thank you.
That's a nice ringing endorsement, Sam. I've got Councillor Peter Chillingworth next.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It does occur to me that there are going to be some difficult decisions to be made in the future. If this is going to be work properly, there are times, I think, when large contracts, the lower tenders, are not necessarily going to be the ones that are the most ethical. And decisions on whether we go for the ethical and pay more are difficult, because somebody's already said that if we pay more, something else will have to give somewhere else. So are some of these decisions going to be moved from officers up to the cabinet at times? Maybe it's happened already, as you people have already been in the cabinet. I just asked the question. Thank you.
I think it's a really good question, and I certainly remember at county, it used to be, there was a ratio, so it was 70% price, 30% value, and we often used to argue that it should be much more equitably split between value and price. But Sam, have you got some indication about how you would move forward with questions like that? Will they be going to cabinet members for approval?
So potentially, I guess this is the difficulty at the moment, because we need to put all those proposals forward and kind of get everyone's views on where they think those levels should be. I do think it's a really valid point. Obviously, when I do get to a position of putting forward, what levels will be agreed by who, but also whether we're willing to spend more on the basis that we're gonna get something else, we're gonna get social value, or they are very green companies. We will put that all forward. However, another really big priority for me, and I can't make any promises, is that I want to find savings through the work that I'm doing, as well as everything else. So I do want to be able to be in a position where we can spend more if we have to achieve what we want, because we've made efficiencies elsewhere, and whether that be through aggregated spend and having contracts that are negotiated better, whether it's through better contract management, or whether it's just through unpicking budgets and seeing where actually we should be doing things very differently. I do hope that we'll be able to find that balance to achieve kind of an equilibrium, I suppose, across the board.
Thank you, Sam. Good luck.
Thank you, Sam. I'll just check if there's any more questions. No, well, it looks like we're content. Well, we would like to see you back in the not too distant future, Sam, when you can give us a bit of an update about how you're progressing with this work. But good luck to you. I'm sure we all believe that you will do a very fine job with this new area of responsibility.
Thank you.
Okay, I think this was a paper to note. I'm just looking for, so it's to agree the proposed next steps in relation to improving social value, implementing performance measures and monitoring impact. And I think setting KPIs is exactly the way forward. So I'm happy to endorse that statement if others are. Thank you. So we'll move on to item number 8, which is the Climate Emergency Action Plan update. And Ben Plummer is going to introduce the item and then we'll take questions.
Yep, thank you, Chair. Yes, as always, the update on the Climate Emergency Action Plan. Several updates have been highlighted in the report. I've got Rosie, who's a council officer, who's been involved with the Clean Air for Colchester project. And I just wanted to check if she wanted to say anything about that project first before we proceed with questions from councillors.
I do have a couple of slides that I could share on the findings of the air quality work if there was time for them, but I'm happy to just take questions if that's preferred.
We'd love to see your slides. So if you can share those with us, that would be marvellous.
Yeah, I shall do that now. Okay. Have they come through okay?
Yes, we can see them clearly. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, so I'm the Air Quality Engagement Officer at Colchester Borough Council, and I just wanted to give an update on where we are with some of the air quality work. So back in 2019, we received some funding from Tetra for a 2-year behaviour change project. And the aim of that project was to reduce pollution in Colchester, particularly with a focus on our air quality management areas to make the air cleaner and healthier for residents and visitors. I've included the objectives mainly because we've evaluated against them. So I just wanted to give a reminder of what they were. So to raise awareness of air pollution and its health impacts, encourage the adoption of switching off the engine when parked, particularly at level crossings and outside schools. Work with schools and a resident community to encourage walking and cycling for short journeys, and to build the capacity of local volunteer group Clean Air Colchester. The project started with 3 months of community engagement in which we spoke to over 3,000 residents, schools and businesses about pollution, to get an understanding of what people knew about the pollution and the impact it can have on health. We used the findings from that engagement to shape the project, and it led to kind of 3 big areas of focus. So there was a roadside signage project, targeted behaviour change work with residents and schools, and our No Idling campaign. Throughout September and October of this year, we've been evaluating this work to see where we are and what we've achieved against the objectives. So I'm just going to share some of the highlights from that work now. I'm going to start with the roadside signage. So the roadside signage was installed in February this year. It's gone up in Brook Street and at Eastgate, which are within our air quality management areas and some of the most polluted parts of our borough. Over the past few months, we've been recording data so we can actually see how many cars are switching off their engines in the area. We've counted over 69,000 vehicles, and we've seen a 9% increase in engine switch off. So prior to the signs going up, we had 12% of drivers switching off their engines, and this has increased to 21% with the signage. Where we are now with the project, the signage has come down for a couple of weeks just while we see how long the effects of the signage last. So we've still been recording the engine switch offs, and they're going back up at the start of January. So they'll be up then from January through to September. So we'll continue to monitor how effective they are and can bring back updates to this meeting in the future. And then in terms of our Careless Pollution No Idling campaign, that launched in October last year. The aim of the campaign is to encourage drivers to switch off their engines, particularly outside schools and in the air quality management area. The key thing with this project is around working with the community, and I just want to share some of the community and partnership work that has happened with this project. Businesses, we've focused on businesses over the last 12 months, particularly delivery firms, Royal Mail, utilities companies, any kind of business with high vehicle usage we've been in contact with. We've been working with businesses on their no idling policies where we can, and sharing our campaign materials with them, including signage. Probably our most productive partnership that we've had to date from this work is with McDonald's, who have put up signage in all their McDonald's car parks and drive-throughs, urging drivers to switch off their engines while they're waiting. On to schools. So I think with schools, it's been slightly more challenging over the past year with the COVID restrictions, schools being closed. But we launched our toolkit, our schools toolkit, back in March. We launched it with 4 schools, which are based in or close to the air quality management area. They trialled the toolkit for us and gave us feedback, and we were then able to adapt it and roll it out to schools across the borough. So it's gone to all schools, but we've had approximately 16 schools that we've worked slightly more closely with, particularly schools like St John's Green and St James's are in the air quality management areas. They've had campaign materials from us. They've been running lessons, assemblies. We've lent them some air pollution monitors, the portable handheld ones, and they've taken the children out to monitor the air quality. Sorry. So this work with schools has been really, really good now that the momentum is picking up and schools are back to normal. So this work will continue on. And community involvement and activation. So the whole focus with this campaign has been around providing people with the resources that they need to be able to take their own action on pollution. And this is what will make it a sustainable campaign, is if local people can take ownership of it and run with it. So the campaign, we had an advisory group made up of local people, businesses, community groups such as Breathe Easy, Colchester, residents associations, and they advised on the campaign. So they saw the materials, they fed into the materials, they helped us decide on what events we should do. We had a network of 50 plus stakeholders who've been helping sharing the materials and messages out through their networks to kind of amplify the campaign and make sure that it's being seen as much as possible. We have a team of local volunteers, and we've involved and used local suppliers for everything. So there's nothing, you know, we've worked with the Mercury Theatre when we were doing our launch stunt in Culver Square. They supplied smoke to go inside our car, which helped us illustrate what happens when you're idling your engine at traffic lights. Your car fills with pollution from outside. And we've done just over the past few months, now everything's back open and COVID restrictions have lifted. We've had a real focus on embedding the campaign into the local community and getting it seen and providing opportunities to speak to people about the campaign and why it's important to switch off the engine, encouraging people to take resources to their schools and workplaces. The campaign's attracted much media coverage, both nationally and locally. And the findings, so awareness levels. So just to say that the campaign launched in October last year and we've evaluated it September and October of this year. So it's been going for 11 to 12 months. And in that time, we've seen a 6% increase in awareness levels around the health impacts of pollution. We've seen 53% of on-street survey respondents saying that they switch off their engines more than they did a year ago. We've had 65% of drivers outside schools reporting that they switch off their engines more than they did a year ago. And in a Colchester Gazette poll, they ran one for us at campaign launch and one for us in October. There was a 10% reduction in the number of respondents saying they never switched their engines off. So what we can see is we've been able to evidence an impact on awareness levels that the campaign and this project has had. And we've recorded an increase in the number of engine switch-offs, and that has been consistent even when the signage has come down. As I mentioned, it's sort of gone up and then come down again so we can assess its impact. Even when the signage is down, the number of switch-offs has still remained increased. So we know that it is having an impact. What we haven't been able to evidence at this stage is the reduction in actual pollution levels. And that is purely because the monitoring, the way we monitor pollution at the moment through the tubes and the monitoring device on Brook Street, we don't have figures from last year that are comparable because obviously with COVID restrictions, there was a massive decrease in traffic along the road. So we can't compare the pollution levels and attribute any reductions to this work. But what we can say is that Essex County Council put in a bid to DEFRA and received funding this year for 9 state-of-the-art pollution monitors, which I think have now been fitted, that give us live data. So they can tell us hour by hour what is happening with the pollution levels in our air quality management areas, which will be just invaluable for this work, because for every event, activity, piece of comms that we do, we can see what impact it's having straight away on the pollution levels. So that's an amazing step forward, I think, for this work. And just on next steps, so as I've mentioned, the pollution monitors have been fitted in the town centre, which will give us that live pollution data. We've had funding to run the Careless pollution campaign for another year, which is really positive because it's just another year that we can embed the campaign into the local community and help make it more sustainable into the future. I should also say that the campaign has been shortlisted for a national award for a Sustainability Leaders Award. So we'll hope to hear the results on that in February. We've also launched a home burning campaign. So that launched last week and it will run over the winter months until February. And that is targeting particulate matter pollution from open fires and log burners in the home. So the aim is to encourage people to burn better fuels, so dry wood, smokeless fuels, rather than kind of things that they find in their garden or Christmas wrapping paper. So it's just an awareness campaign to help people make informed decisions around what they burn. And finally, just to say that I can't get my words out, the signage study is still underway, and that will complete towards the end of next year, so we can continue to provide an update on that work.
Thanks very much. It's a very comprehensive report, Rosie. I've got Mark and then Lee.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Rosie. Really interesting. We sort of saw this from the start and now almost at its finish. But it's good to hear you've got another year's funding. I'll come back to that in a bit. I just wondered if we see a difference in seasonal pollution, because I can imagine sitting down in one of those streets and turning your car off at that point, and the fan heater, everything goes off, so people might be cold. I went to get my booster jab in Leisure World car park the other day, and people were asked to go and sit in their car afterwards, and people put their engine on. I didn't, because I didn't want to do that, but others did, and I do worry about that. I fully understand people need to keep warm, people need to charge devices, but I do think we've got further to go on that. And I sometimes challenge people on that, but in often a very soft way, that you've got to be careful. Secondly, I just wondered, with the further funding, is there anything different or novel we could do? For example, buying a certain amount of bikes and saying, right, trade your bike for a car, and instead of trying to switch engines off. That's a whole different thing. And I wondered if we can't stray too much from the original parameters, but would be eager to hear about that. Just on a last point, the open fires thing, I've seen the pollution is possibly about 20 times worse than car pollution. I think it's about 23 times. I always like the idea of an open fire and love to go to a pub with an open fire, but I don't have one and wouldn't want to now because of the environmental impact, but it's staggering. So I'm glad you're now going into that territory to help people as well. Thank you.
Okay, just to answer some of the questions. So I think the first year of the campaign has been just around kind of getting that general message out and building up the awareness that actually there is an issue with pollution, and making the link between people's actions and you know, what the consequences are, because we saw from our original engagement something like 90% of people were concerned about pollution in Colchester, yet only 15% of people were switching off their engine. So there wasn't that link between action and consequence. So we've spent that year trying to make that, and I think the focus of the next year is around addressing some of the things that you've just mentioned, so the myths and facts. So for example, you can switch off your engine in cold weather while you're sitting in traffic, and your fan will continue to blow out hot air for up to half an hour. So they're the kind of messages that we're now going to try and work on, the kind of myths and facts, so that yeah, it's sort of taking the campaign that next step. And then in terms of the funding and what will happen next, so I haven't covered it in this presentation because I think it might be coming to a future panel meeting, but part of the funding, or a big chunk of the funding, is for some work to bring some sustainable transport hubs to Colchester, and they'll include electric bikes and cargo bikes and just push bikes that people can use on a pay-as-you-go basis and just book and make their short journeys using those. And there'll be a massive piece of work going on around that. The smaller amount of funding that we've got is for the continuation of the Careless pollution campaign, which is solely focused on getting people to switch off their engine, just because we know that it's such a small action that can have such a big impact. So it is a piece of work that we did want to continue. I think that was all your points. If I've missed anything, let me know.
No, I think Councillor Corey is content. I've got Lee next.
Yeah, many thanks for that. That's really appreciated to give us an update on that, because I was actually going to ask a question to the portfolio holder because I wasn't sure what was happening with the campaign. So it's good to see that we are still moving forward. Just a few questions from that. First one is, have we spoken to bus companies? Because I've noticed that buses are quite poor at turning their engine off in many places. Also, could we look at expanding some of, maybe if we've taken down some of the signage, could we move it to some other areas? So just top of my head, you have Hive Station Road where you have the level crossing. You have Southway where it gets very busy at certain times. It's a flat straight where you could put signs up. And also, I'm guessing the rationale between for taking the signs down was to see how effective the campaign was. Otherwise, I would be asking to repay the money for them. And coming from a comms background, the message, the whole key to comms is repeat, repeat, repeat. You keep repeating the same message, and it finally drills itself into people's head. And as you said, education, really important. Good to see that. Hopefully we're going to do more on that. What I would have liked to see on the signage is added to what it says already is about, and you save some of your petrol, because if people see a kind of carrot end to it, they're more likely to actually switch off their engine or think about it again. But it's good to kind of see the stats that we have improved those figures. Not hugely, but we have improved them quite well. You know, by over 10% increase is good. As Councillor Corey has said, the weather, some people just assume that if they turn it off, the heater won't blow and so forth. But yeah, they're my main questions, Rosie.
Rosie, are you able to answer those points?
Yeah, so bus companies we have spoke to, we asked all bus companies to if we could work with them on their no idling policies. I think it's been a tricky time for buses over the last year or so, and I think much like schools, their attention has been focused on their kind of COVID recovery, which has made kind of engaging with them slightly more difficult over the last year. But we, yes, bus companies are on our kind of radar, and we will continue to focus on them and work with them and support them where we can. In terms of expanding the signage, I think it's always been an ambition that the signage will expand to other areas. I think we've wanted to see if it actually works, if it's effective. Within the signage study, there's been some mini trials where we've been trialing different messages in different locations. We've tried rotating them every few weeks, and we're just trying to look at what has the biggest impact. And we can then, once we've got that information, roll it out confidently to other areas, knowing that we've tried it, we've tested it, and we know that it's going to work, and what we're doing is going to have the biggest effect. And in terms of fuel use, I think that is definitely going to be one of our key messages over the next year. It's like one of the myths and facts, I think, that like switching off and having heat. And in terms of having it on signage, we haven't put it on the signage as yet, just because we've kind of built on messages that have been tested elsewhere. So, I mean, it's certainly something that we can consider. But yeah, we haven't to date, just for the sole reason that we've building on the Norwich and Canterbury studies. So, and we've gone also with our research findings that found that people were more motivated by health over money. But yeah, we'll certainly be including it in our comms messages going forward.
Thanks very much. I've got Peter next.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I too would like to thank Rosie for her work. This is not easy work. You're dealing with the public in a very sensitive area, driving cars. Yeah. First of all, I'd like to welcome the fact that you're getting these monitors from the County Council. I think it's so important that we find out what effect all this campaigning and money being spent has, whether we are actually lowering our pollution. The problem is seasonality. I'm sure that's a problem. And as we come out of lockdowns, people are traveling far more. So there's going to be an increase in traffic. Being out there tonight, I was staggered by the amount of traffic, which I try and avoid at 5 o'clock time. So yes, I think it's important to know the effect we're having. And the other thing is that I've always been keen that the council takes our policies to the public in the borough. The declaration we made was really to, in effect, looking at our internal council work and practices, whereas I see this as taking it to the public in the borough. We should be the leaders, the exemplars. And this is a really big example where we should be explaining to the public what we're doing. I think one example of where we haven't been very successful has been where we've stopped cutting green areas in the town, with a lot of people objecting to the fact that we're not keeping the place tidy. But have we really told them why we're doing it and try and take them with us? And this is another area. Do they know what we're doing and why we're doing it? And hopefully in the future, when we have the monitors, we'll be able to tell them what effect their turning off the engines, etc., is. So I would like to make the point that communication, as has already been said, is so important, and we must keep talking and being shown the public what we're doing and why. Thank you.
Rosie, comms, can you give some insight into that?
I can. I mean, we're working on our comms plan now for the next year. So we will have something that we can share at the next meeting. But I think something we definitely could do more of is letting people know what the council are doing in-house. So obviously we have our own no idling policy, and we can definitely include some more of what we're doing on the issue ourselves within our comms. Just trying to think what I think a big focus, like I've said, of the comms going forward is around the myths and the facts and the continued education. We'll be doing lots more engagement over the next year, and the main focus is around the kind of peer-to-peer engagement over the next year. So we'll be using schools, some of our target groups, to actually take the messages out to their organisation. So, for example, we plan to work with, for example, a bus company on their no idling policies and communications on this issue, and then enable them to then take the campaign out to their networks, other bus companies. That might be a bad example, but yeah, it's going to be more of a focus on peer-to-peer networks, and feeding in more comms around what we're doing as a council will definitely be part of that. But yes, there is a campaign comms plan under construction, which can be shared with you soon.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good idea. And sorry, I've got some Ben?
I wanted to bring in Democratic Services because I think Maggie's raised her hand. Yeah.
Okay, I will do so in a moment. What I wanted to speak about, I mean, I think Councillor Corey talked about gently having a word with people, and I've certainly done that and done that recently. So I think us as councillors, we could take a pledge, couldn't we? We could have a pledge card, if you like, and take a pledge that we will challenge people as politely as we can to not do it. And we could see whether that would be something that would find favour with other councillors, because, you know, Councillor Chillingworth, you talked to us about us being leaders, and that's what we should be doing. We should be publicly, standing there saying that we are leading the call to Colchester residents to join us in this battle against air pollution. So I think that's something, Rosie, maybe you'd want to consider thinking about. I think sometimes words are cheap. And I'll give you an example. We can't do this on our own. It's clear that we can't do this on our own. And if all of us know that in the school holidays, there are a lot less cars around. When it's school time, children are being moved around Colchester in cars. And I know you've been working with schools, but we know that messages that come out in school bags and they are, they're championing from their children tend to be listened to by parents. So I think there's more work we can do actually with getting those messages out to parents via their own children. But I noted with interest there was a response you shared on one of your slides from Colchester High School. And I don't want to particularly name and shame, but Colchester High School had an open day about 2 to 3 months ago now. And the whole of Hospital Road was completely blocked with queuing 4x4s, all with their engines going. And I happened to be walking down that road with my 7-month-old granddaughter, she was probably 5 months at the time, who of course is in a pushchair right at the level of exhaust fumes. And so I felt really quite strongly about that. So by the time I got to Colchester High School, there was somebody controlling the traffic going into the car park. And I did remonstrate with them and say, you really should be going up to all of these cars in a queue. And there must have been 30 cars there, all great big cars, I have to say, and saying to them, yes, you're queuing to get into the car park, but please, while you queue, turn off your engine. So they've been engaged with this campaign. They've told you that your material is very clearly worded, but actually their actions, they've done something different. They haven't actually taken any action to actually make it possible for the people that are coming to their school to actually do something about it. And I think, there are other schools that we can think of, which are, the grammar schools where children are travelling long distance actually to get to those schools. The more community schools, we would hope that there's more walking and cycling going on to get children to those schools. But it's those schools where children are travelling, some significant distances actually, that we actually need the schools really to be on board with us and say, if you're bringing your child to our school, this is what we expect here in the Borough of Colchester. And, I don't know whether they would be prepared to sort of make that sort of some rules of attending the school. But I do think that there's more work we need to do with schools to get them on board and help us with this work. So that's my sort of rant over this evening, and I just might share my personal story with you. And I think I've got Maggie, which probably has been patiently waiting. I can't see hands up from here. So Maggie, I'll bring you in, and then David wants to come in as well. So over to you, Maggie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to add to Rosie's excellent presentation and response to Councillor Chillingworth's question around communications. And thank you for your passion as well around that more work needs to be done in the schools. What we're hoping to do with our engagement is really piggyback on the different projects that we have in place at the moment. So as Rosie said, she can share the comms plan that will be coming out, but also beyond the communications of, messaging out what kind of behavior we seek from our residents and visitors. We'll also be engaging with them much more, and you'll see this in our presentation to the panel on the 24th of February. Around, and Rosie did also mention it, around the different types of cycle hubs. What do residents, what do visitors businesses want to see out of our sustainable transport options that we're hoping to demonstrate, pilot for use and to learn from, and then to scale up. So all of that will be a way for us to piggyback on the messaging of if you are choosing an option of a car use, then don't forget to switch off the engine. So hopefully you'll start to feel that these messages start to layer and discuss with one another, so that it can deepen, especially when people feel that they're empowered to have choices. So just wanted to add that in as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Maggie. I've got Councillor King next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Maggie. Thank you, Rosie. That was fascinating, which of course earns you lots of questions. I'll try and keep them as brief as I can. Beyond the thank you. On pollution, those monitors, could you confirm where they are situated? There are monitors, I know, up and down, for example, Bergholt Road. Are all of the old monitors being replaced? That's the first question. And if not, are we exploring whether we can? Could I ask, in terms of pollution, and you've given a series of causes, if we can say where, and typical is impossible, I guess, but to the extent that we know what the relative greatest impacts are from current research, because it seems to me that when it comes to resources and the focus, we might want to just be weighing all the time, I'm sure you are, where we might make the most impact. We all think about car pollution perhaps a little bit more than the fire, but I take the point made about the significance of each. So something around relativity will be, not in the Einstein sense, but the relativity will be really helpful. And perhaps just beyond asking you for a sharing of the images you showed, because I would use them, and I would use any emergent facts you've got. So perhaps you might think about that. Councillors are, as the chair said, supposed to be leaders. We can't on the time. We try to, don't we? And I think if you give us some more material, perhaps think about circulating that around all councillors. Some of us at least would go and use that, stick it on our social media. So yeah, this boils down to use us to amplify the messaging you've got, and think about that when you go through phases of release of material. I know it's out there, but that's quite different from it landing in our inbox. And last thing, we are finished then, planting. I know, Chair, you have this view. We ought to look at, I do too, we ought to look at what planting eats up some of that pollution. We know that some is more effective than others. Are there any plans to do anything about that on some of these roads which are narrow, difficult to traverse? So I know there's an issue about breadth and space, but if we do something that is both visually attractive and also scoffs up some pollution, that would be an amplifying help. Thank you.
Rosie, there's some really excellent points there, and I particularly endorse the point about using us to try and push out the message more. Would you like to come back, Rosie?
Yeah, so with the pollution monitors, the new ones, there are 9 that are being fitted, and they are all central, so High Street, there's one on Brook Street. I have a map of the location, so I can share that with the group, because off the top of my head, I don't know where they all are, other than that they are all sort of town centre. And the reason for that is that is where our pollution hotspots are. So they are positioned in some of our worst areas. So I'll send that map around. They're not replacing our current network, they are adding to it. So we have 70 plus diffusion tubes, we have the continuous monitor on Brook Street, and these are an addition to those, but it's these that will give us the live data that we don't have at the moment. So that was that point. In terms of sharing materials and images, we have a toolkit, a sort of community toolkit. Within that, there's pictures, there's social media posts, various materials that I'm more than happy to share. We have a very small amount of printed materials that we could also share if you're doing any events or activities. So yes, I'll get that circulated. And then the middle point around the relativity, would you mind just clarifying that point, and I'll see if I can answer.
Sorry, Rosie, if I may, Madam Chair. Obviously not clear enough. It won't be the first or the last time. We know that pollution's caused, air pollution is caused, air quality is damaged by a number of different causes. I wondered if we had any feel for what is most important of those relative causes. And that was my relativity point.
Okay, well, we know that in our air quality management areas, and they're the areas where we need to bring the pollution levels down to within the kind of national guidelines, it's vehicle emissions that are the biggest problem. So that's why this work is focused primarily on car use. So I hope that helps. And if I can find any papers or information that kind of break it down a bit more, I can share that.
Rosie, that'd be fine. Thank you. I'll save you that job. You've told me the obvious, and it's always good to be told that. Thanks.
Yes, and I think the only point that perhaps you haven't picked up is the carbonators, and I might be able to actually help with that. My cousin worked in a sort of agricultural industry that sort of has quite expertise on that. So I'll share some details of some potential plants that you could think about planting, Rosie, in specific areas, perhaps like in Brook Street. Be good to see some of that happening. I have to say, just to announce that we're not having a party here at the town hall, but the Colchester Grammar School are. I have to say, very dubious choice in music, and they sounds like they're wearing clogs up there. So we've got a bit of clog dancing going on and some dubious music. So that will probably be heard on Zoom too. But we will battle on regardless. And I've got Peter next.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I was going to talk about the degree of pollution, and particularly in regard to the wood burning. I'm sure it's a very, very small proportion of the pollution, although it's a different sort of pollution. It's particulate pollution, as opposed to the gases, I think, that probably the cars generate. But if you have any information on the degree of pollution, where it is with wood burning stoves, I would like to hear. But I would also like to be given some of the information that you've promised us, which I would find very useful, because I try and write articles in the parish magazines and things in my area. I don't do social media as much as some, I must admit. But within the town, I'm sure social media is probably the better way of doing it, where you don't have parish mags. So information is always useful when I'm writing. I feel that wood burning is a good thing. Living in the country, as opposed to the town, I try to be eco-friendly by having solar panels, doing my best to insulate the house, to have heat pumps. But to top up heat pumps, I use a wood burning stove, and I use old wood from trees that have come down or pruned. So I think I'm being green. And I wouldn't like to think there is a campaign to try and stop wood burning stoves, but they can be efficient and they can be inefficient. And I agree that burning the right sort of wood, well seasoned, is key. And to have the right type of stone, which does contain its particulates and doesn't let it leak into the room. And having the right sleeve in the chimney, the right cowl, it's all important to make sure you get efficient burning. So it's all a matter of degree, I think. So I would like to be assured that we aren't actually trying to stop wood burning stoves, especially in the countryside, which I think is a really important element of our future heating. I don't think there's a question there, was there? I'm not sure. I lost myself. Yes, about the degree of pollution. Thank you.
I think, Peter, what you're asking is there a conscious effort to stop people burning wood in wood stoves? So Rosie, over to you.
Yeah, there was also the question about where. So we have done some research. We got some information from the fire service about open fires, and it's Newtown, Castle Ward and Christchurch that have the biggest number of open fires. So they're a kind of those areas will be a focus for some of this work. And in terms of burning, no, the campaign isn't the purpose of the campaign to tell people not to burn. It's to encourage people to burn cleaner fuels, so dry seasoned wood and smokeless coal. So it's more of an information sharing campaign rather than telling people not to burn. That's not the aim of it.
That's reassuring.
Right, thank you very much, Rosie. I think we've probably covered off that item really, really well. Actually, we had a really good debate on that. So we thank you for joining us tonight, Rosie. I'll go back to Ben to see if he wants to highlight any of the other items that are in the executive summary, and if there's any members that want to ask questions about that. But back to you, Ben.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair. The main items that I wanted to bring out the report, and happy to take questions on any of the other stuff that's in there afterwards as well. Firstly, the item on single-use plastics. We got an update. Councillor King asked for this at the last meeting, so just highlighting that we got some information from both the museums team and the leisure services team on how they've cut out single-use plastics in their operations. Another one touching on the point that's been brought up today about councillors being important for communicating messages about the council's work is the energy efficiency grant scheme that the council's running at the moment, the Green Homes Grant Local Authority Delivery Scheme. This money is for households who are on low incomes and in living in houses of low energy efficiency. This is full grant funding to make various improvements to their homes, such as insulation, double glazing, draft proofing, things that will save them money on their energy bills, as well as reducing carbon emissions. The council has done some promotion of this already, and we intend to do another sort of surge of promotion after Christmas when the sort of busyness of that is out the way. And I know some councillors have been sharing this on their own social media accounts and other social media pages. That's very much appreciated, but very much welcome further support with doing that, especially sort of in January for sort of further drive on that, be really appreciated. But yeah, the rest of the updates are in the report. And if anyone does have any specific questions about those, happy to take those.
Thanks very much. I've got Lee.
Thanks as ever, Ben. I think we spend a lot of this committee thanking you for your work on this, but really good again to see us going in the right direction. Just a few questions. So on single-use plastic, have we got a target date to actually completely eliminate it? Also, what kind of plastic are we still using would be quite interesting, or what the issues may be that we're having in some of our services. And another idea I had when I was reading through your reports is, could we as CBC maybe become a base that can recycle some types of plastic that we don't pick up as with our usual waste, so kind of Tetra packs, your kind of cat food parcels that the co-op take, but CBC don't. I'm wondering, maybe could we work as a council, maybe even with county council, with the library services, just to have a drop-off point to help with initiatives there. And if you had them in the offices, obviously our own staff members can bring in some of their recycling that won't get picked up on the usual weekday.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Scordis. So with regards to single-use plastics and a target date, I don't think that's something that the council has set a target date on at all for eliminating single-use plastics, and it's not something that I have much knowledge on myself in terms of how we're using them in other operations. I'll pass it over to any other colleagues if they want to expand on that after this. And again, in terms of the recycling further stuff, I'll pass that comment on to after this meeting to the environment service team who's sort of involved with the recycling. And I'm sure they can speak with Essex County Council about that, about drop-off points. I think that is a good idea if that can be worked out. When we were all working from the office as normal, we did have collections for crisp packets, toothpaste tubes, things like that for council staff to be able to bring in, which we then dropped off at Enform, who collect for TerraCycle. Obviously, with less people going in the office now at the moment, that sort of has dropped off. But if sort of wider returning to office sort of base working sort of works, we will probably resume that. And we can communicate to staff that that option for dropping off at Enform is still available for hard to recycle plastics, like you say, plastic films, cat food pouches, things like that. So yeah, that answers it to some degree.
So, sorry, Chair, just on that then, Ben, is it worth maybe working with Enform around, I guess, expanding on what they're doing? Because a lot of people don't know they exist. Generally, we in this room know, but a lot of people don't. And I guess similar to what Chris Blomley was doing from Wivenhoe, which he was doing in the library, where it was you had drop-off recycle point, you know, could we have that possibly in the town hall or look at initiative like that, or the library, or both? You know, if we get 100 families doing that in Colchester, that saves a lot. It might not seem big a number in the grand scheme of things, but it has an impact.
Again, it's something I can pass on to other colleagues as an idea. I think it's a good idea, and we'll see if that can be actioned and looked into.
Thank you very much. I've got Mark next.
Thank you, Julie. I just wanted to pick up on Lee's point about Tetra Pak recycling. I definitely have spoken to Melinda Melton, who is one of our educational officers within the zone teams, used to be a zone warden for my area. So in Wivenhoe, I have asked for us to be a pilot example to collect Tetra Paks. I do have a personal interest. I use a lot of them when using oat milk, which is the most responsible milk to use. And you try and be responsible on one hand, and then you've got to try and then recycle these products on the other hand. So there's always a swing and roundabout with this stuff. And I go to Tesco, Greenstead Tesco is always packed full. Most people don't realise you can go around the back of it and still stick things in the back, but it's annoying, and we need to make sure it's as easy as possible to recycle that stuff. What we have done in Wivenhoe is use some of our locality budgets through the town council fund some of the crisp packet stuff. So we're doing that, and there are, as Lee and you point to, many good examples, but I think Lee's absolutely right. We need to make it so easy for people that they're almost tripping over it to make it be taken up. I was just going to say, I didn't see in the report any further update on the e-cargo bike scheme, and I just know how fantastic this scheme is. And I used a bike, rented a bike for a few months, and I just wanted to thank again Emily Howard for her patience and her work on that, and your support with her, Ben. It's such a fantastic project. I know staff are now trying to use them more, but whatever we can do, please keep in touch on how we can push that project forward. It encouraged me to cycle tenfold more. I used it most days of the month rather than barely one day using a normal bike. So we've got to encourage that use, and I will happily see what else we can share and use. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I'll just your points. Actually, I'll pass over to Maggie, because I think she had her hand up first, as you might have been talking about the previous.
Thanks, Ben. Yes, I just wanted to mention that we do have the draft waste strategy coming to the panel on the 24th of February. So we'll be giving you an update on the strategy then for comment and feedback. We'll take, as Ben said, the suggestions to officers then. And thank you for the commendation for Emily Harrop, and we will certainly pass that on. Again, we'll be having an update to you on the sustainable modes of travel strategy and our electric vehicles in the same panel meeting. But we can always share with you updates on how things are progressing for the e-cargo projects, as we have our quarter reports that we do for the Energy Saving Trust, which is the funder. So always happy to share some of our updates with you via email if that's helpful.
Thanks very much. Do I have any other questions? David.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for this part of this rich, wider report. I'm just trying to concentrate over the sound. We might have a decibel limit, I think, for the first 2 hours of the committee, Madam Chair, and then after it can go up, and that would encourage us to finish. It'll be more good, wouldn't it? But to the subject, Ben, apart, again, thank you from me, like others. This was a particular obsession for me. We all get some. Plastics was one of them, and it's 3 years ago. And I just want to sort of say fantastic progress, really. It's got a lot richer. There was a lot of reluctance at the beginning, it's the truth of the matter. But the wider public mood was changing, and we rode that in a good way. So it's a positive back from me. A lot of great work, and I really welcome it. We started off with plastics pledge, and we did the things you do. We did some comms. We signed ourselves up for making the changes which have grown like wildfire in the best kind of way, and which should go through the organisation, and by supporting refill. And not for now necessarily, but it'll be good to know what we're going to do about those two things, because those two things do tie together as one encouragement. Plastics pledge was we'll do stuff, we'll change. So it'll be good to hear confirmation that it's a whole council piece. So every part of the council, and you listed most of the arms of it, but the whole council is continuing to be committed to phasing out or stopping completely single-use plastic. And if I can say this again, it links to the earlier item, Madam Chair, the absolute importance of using us and using our own staff. Middle-sized employer, big employer for Colchester, we ought to be thinking, it's an open question to you, are we going to them and saying, look, this really matters, this stuff really matters, and encouraging them to be advocates as colleagues of others, but because it's an important thing which this council has an important role. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor King, for the comments. So yeah, I'll pass on the comments of the positive progress to the teams who've been working on that. In terms of the plastic pledge and sort of the work throughout the whole council, I think it's something that people are aware of just through sort of the climate emergency declaration. It's sort of one of those sort of, feels like one of those sort of quite obvious changes that you can make. Plastic's quite visible, and there's been lots of sort of documentaries and things about it. We can further reinforce that, and I suggest it's also one of the things that we can look at with some of the procurement as well. So procuring stuff that is made of recycled plastic or other materials where they're more sustainable, to cut down on single-use plastics there, so that we're not using them within the council for a lot of our operations. One, for example, the woodland and biodiversity projects have been using biodegradable rabbit guards rather than plastic rabbit guards, and they had to make a investment at a cost premium for that investment rather than using the plastic one. So there has been changes that have been made already, but I think we can focus on it more as we go forward. Yeah.
Thank you. I just draw everyone's attention to the asset management strategy, and I think 120 million for the stop to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2030 is something we should all be taking account of. I mean, that's 9 years' time. So where we're going to find 120 million, I know not. And I think that sort of kind of demonstrates what we were talking about at full council in terms of asking government for additional money to help us with that task, because without additional money coming from government, I cannot see how we're going to actually achieve that. But it's there for us all to see. I don't have any further comments on the report. Are there any other comments or questions from councillors? David.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for reminding me of what we did discuss in our pre-brief, which is that extraordinary £120 million investment figure. What we did say was, Ben, and I think it's for later, is that that number would be good to understand in terms of how it might be reached if spread over, and I think the response already was it's if over a 30-year period and so on and so forth. So we know it's a start. It's right to acknowledge it as whatever set of numbers, whoever pays them, there are big sums of money having to be invested across the nation if we're going to address insulation and other issues around heat and energy efficiency. So I thank you for the reminder, and if I can turn it into an action for the team, Madam Chair, I think that would be useful. However long it takes, we accept it might be very, very general for quite a long time, and government funding is absolutely critical. The thing I wanted to just add was, and it's on the same subject, yeah, this report is a great capture of lots of really good work. You know, it's a rich and readable summary, but can I sort of repeat the point that we've made together before, which is at some stage, the price tag needs to be kind of, however loosely and indicative, attached to some of those actions, so that we've got some sense of the emerging challenge, because at some stage, unless government really pour a lot of resources to us, we're going to have to make some resource and balancing decisions, and this committee can play a part in shaping a view about those. Thank you.
I think they're all very well made points. An eye on the finance is something we should be doing for definite in terms of this strategy and action plan. I've got Lindsey Barker and then I've got you, Peter.
Yeah, I just, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to pick up on the investment in the housing stock. That's definitely an item I can take away, but just to reassure you, there's an awful lot of work going on in the housing space at the moment through our work on the asset management strategy, the housing investment programme, and the new HRA business plan will come into Cabinet and Council in the new year, partly to be able to set the budgets, but also to reset that 30-year business plan. It is very, very challenging, because not only do we have to do our sustainability work, we also have to do a very considerable amount of compliance work too. So there's a lot of work going on to see how far we can push the investment in the sustainable measures while still making sure that we are investing in our stock. But I think it's already come to councillors' attention. You know, we are relatively in a good place compared to a lot of other councils, and the focus will be on bringing up those properties that are still lagging behind in the first instance. The other thing I just wanted to say as well is that I am in discussions with the new chief exec at Colchester Borough Homes, who is incredibly keen to try and tap into any funding that is available to increase the investment that we can make. And him and I are meeting soon, actually, before Christmas, to further that conversation. And he brings in ideas and examples from other local authorities where they have been doing some really interesting work in this space. So I know he is also incredibly committed to try and increase that pot, if you like. So there's a lot of work going on, but we simply don't have enough resources to do it at the pace we would really like to, I think, is the honest answer.
Thank you, Peter.
Yes, Madam Chairman, it's a fact that I've been worried about for a long time. The biggest challenge for the nation, I think, in getting rid of fossil fuels is our housing stock and retrofitting it, insulating it, and bringing in new forms of heating. It isn't something just for us. Every local authority in the country will be in the same position. And I don't think there's, to be honest, very much point in us trying to lobby government. They know the problem. But I do think the way we can do it and should be doing it is through the LGA. They are our voice. They will speak on behalf of all councils who have these properties to manage in the future. And I would like to think our council could engage with the LGA and try and push them to tell government how important and how much money, the scale of this problem, which will have to be answered over a period of years, right up to 2050, because it's a huge problem and it will take that long. And in Colchester, we are not going to do it by 2030. It's a national problem. Thank you.
And just to add to that, I think from what we've seen, Colchester stock is in a lot better shape than a lot of areas. So we will be at the bottom of the list in terms of getting additional funding. So I think that's a proposal that Peter has made in terms of sending a recommendation from the panel that goes to the cabinet member for the environment, that he does lobby the LGA and contact them to see what is being done. They must be discussing this at the LGA level. So if that can be noted and that message passed on from this committee, if members are content with that, I'll make sure that that happens. I've got Mark.
Thank you, Julie. I do sit on an LGA committee, but not one focused on the environment. But I do think if we are to do that, which I absolutely support, is that we actually state that we have done this much work. We have put 4.4 million into greening our housing stock. We have got government money to invest in a heat network on the largest scale in Britain. We've got a lot to offer, and actually examples where if government back us, we can go further. And I think that's important to show examples of what we've done before when we're then asking for more money, which we should have. Thank you.
Lindsey, is that something you can capture in terms of a statement to go to the cabinet member? Thank you. Right, we will plough on. If there's no further questions, Ben, thank you very much for your continued hard work on the action plan, and we look forward to your next update to us. And I think that brings us, members, to the work programme. And at this point, I'll introduce Matthew to take us through that.
Thanks, Chair. This is, as you know, a standard item. The only thing that I would ask the panel to consider, it's been suggested that an item be brought to the panel in March next year, which will be an overview of the Environment Act. And if the panel's agreeable, we would add that into the work programme for next March. Thank you.
Members content with that? Yes. Mark, did you want to speak?
Sorry, Julie. Thank you. Yes, you mentioned before that I'd brought it up before about getting cycle storage into the agenda, and I assume that fits perfectly on the 24th of February under the Sustainable Modes of Travel strategy. So I just wanted to check if that was right to think that. Thank you.
I think that's been noted. Thank you. Right, well, that sort of brings us to the end of the meeting, and I do apologise to members. We had a very cold meeting last Wednesday without even a cup of tea available, and now we've had to contend with the noise above, and I will be doing something about that, because the town hall, we know, needs to make money in terms of hiring out its facilities, but we have important things to discuss, and so maybe we should have known a little bit about what was planned for this evening, and maybe we could have moved elsewhere to hold this meeting. But I will take that offline and do something about that. So all there is left to say is have a very happy Christmas. Thank you. I declare the meeting closed.